Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ralf Dahrendorf Roundtable Digital Lives at Home in the Public Sphere. We would like to remind that this roundtable discussion is organized by the European Liberal Forum with the support of the Fondazione Luigi Einaudi. The event is co-funded by the European Parliament that is not responsible for the content of the program or for any use that be made of it. The views do not necessarily reflect those of the European Parliament and or the European Liberal Forum. So, thank you everyone for joining this roundtable. It is an honor for us to host you here in this hybrid event, still hybrid, between Rome and the premises of the Fondazione Luigi Einaudi and, well, obviously on Zoom. So welcome everyone, and please allow me first to give the speech to Marco Mariani, ELF board member, for an introductory remarks to the event.
Thank you, Gianmarco. Good morning and welcome to this seminar promoted by the European Liberal Forum with the support of Fondazione Luigi Einaudi. And first of all, thank you for taking time out and being here today. I'm Marco Mariani. I'm the European Affairs Director at Luigi Einaudi Foundation and member of the board of the European Liberal Forum as well. For those who do not know us yet, we are the political foundation and think tank of the ALDE party. We are working across Europe with 47 member organizations to test new ideas for a liberal future in united Europe. Almost every day we hold an event, so I kindly invite you to check out our fantastic website, which is daily updated. As you know, today's seminar is dedicated to a very interesting subject, digital lives. More than 30 years have passed since the new digital technologies began to develop and spread in society, thanks to the mass diffusion of the graphical personal computer and the Windows operating system. Since 1996, we have also witnessed a further revolution with the birth of internet and the World Wide Web. The process, whose diffusion initially appeared slow and unclear to many, in the space of a few years has increasingly replaced the two analog system for managing information and communication, creating a new evolutionary form of Homo sapiens, namely that of the digital natives. Today we are facing the simultaneous presence of three generations of people, each with a different attitude towards digital technological innovation. The first one are the Gutenberg natives, the so-called children of the book. I mean those who reject any technological and digital innovation because they are stuck in the analog era, and at the most they use the mobile phone. The second group is the digital immigrants. I mean those who even they were born in the analog era, they try to adapt to the changes produced by the web society. They often use new technologies, but do not feel at ease with them. Finally, the third group, the digital natives, I mean those who were born in the digital age and in particular from the 19th onwards. They have a particular familiarity with the new technologies, which they learn to use naturally and without difficulty, acquiring new and multitasking learning methods from birth. The current pandemic suddenly confronted everyone with the urgent need to use new technologies to overcome the physical limits imposed by social distancing. In this sense, it is a substantial and revolutionary change in our society, which involves a readjustment of the social order, which is not always immediate and without difficulties and complexities. That's why it's going to be very fascinating to hear today's speakers talk about digital lives at home and in the public sphere. So I pass the floor back to Gianmarco Bovenzi and enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you so much for your introduction. And so please allow me to introduce the panelists at this point. So as you know, the roundtable will be structured in two panels, first of which will deal with the topic of home office, working remotely. We have the honor to host Sharka Prat, who is director of the Institute for Politics and Society and ELF board member. Welcome and thank you for being here. Also, Giulia Pastorella, who is the EU Government Relations Director of Zoom, Luisa De Vita, Associate Professor in Economic Sociology at Sapienza University of Rome, Mr. Pavel Čaček, Sociologist, Social and Consumer Trends Observer, founder of the Research Collective. So for the first panel. For the second panel, which will deal with the role of social media platform and the interaction with the states, we have the honor to host Professor Roberto Ricciuti, who is actually here with us in Rome, Ricardo Silvestre from Movimento Liberal Social Portugal, and Stefano D'Empoli, President of ICOM, the Institute for Competitiveness, who is also here as well with us. So at this point, I would start with the first panel and the first topic, which is home office. Ms. Sarkaprat, if I may. So could you, actually this is a question, it's a bit, who do you think took advantage or disadvantage from this situation? Who won and who lost from what's been happening?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, thank you very much for inviting me and for a kind introduction. It's a very interesting question. I don't know if you can say really who won or who lost, but I would definitely say that in the last decade, digitalization has begun to rapidly transform our lives. And it shows little sign of abate. And digitalization affects how we interact and work online and with each other. And for sure, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many employers in the private sector and self-employed workers to make a decision regarding whether or not their employees should continue working from home. But I think the home office became a crucial tool, not only for protecting workers from illness, but also for maintaining the operation of companies in a full or limited capacity. And so if I would compare, I think the shift to working from home has largely provided beneficial for those who have experienced it. At the same time, that doesn't mean that it has been ideal for everyone. Working from home in this matter is relatively uncharted territory, and as such, some companies have struggled with figuring out appropriate wages and work hours. And when employees have differing work habits, for example, working at different times of the day or for different amounts of time, on what metric should the company reward them? That's quite a hard question. I think that some have implemented a pay cut to work from home under the assumption that without a daily commute and stress, employees do not need to be rewarded as much. But some of them added money to their salaries because they are spending their electricity at home and so on. So I wouldn't generally say that it takes advantage of employees or disadvantage of employees, but it also depends on the worker and the company and their ability to reach an agreement which works for both of them.
So actually in this regard, just the last thing you said, can I address to Professor De Vita? As for employees, actually, and the possible side effects and drawbacks that this situation might have caused, home office might have caused, is there anything that could be associated with this current condition?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thanks for this invitation to this interesting discussion. And yes, about your questions, I think that there are at least three critical points, in my opinion. The first aspect I want to stress, I think, concerns the spaces in which the work takes place. Because a problem that is often enlightened is the overlap between private domestic space and workspace, and therefore the impossibility of separating domestic and care activities, because everything takes place in the same space. However, in my opinion, the problem is not only the overlap, so this impossibility to make work and make also the domestic burden, but also the lack of suitable space to work. Home environments are not designed to work, and for example, they are not large enough. Workers don't have another room exclusively dedicated for smart work. For smart working, and often the equipment is shared. So I think this could produce inequalities, not only economic one, but also inequalities related to the ability to know how to choose the right tool, for example, for doing work. Another important aspect for me, and especially related to Italian context, I think is competencies. The fact that in most of cases, company and organization have started smart working relying only on the resources of the worker, I think has increased workload and increased also stress and insecurity, for example, in the performance of one's work. So I think that if smart working can be an opportunity to learn, for example, to improve digital skills, I think it's also important to support the workers with a program of tutoring, training for better managing the different workloads. Therefore, I think that management should provide clear objective, and time and goal need to be modified with respect to the office routine. In many cases, what we see that work schedules and goals have not been adapted to the carried out remotely. And I think this is something that needs to be fixed. So just a briefly consideration on the aspect of isolation. The increase in the level of stress is also due to the impossibility to have a dialogue and a discussion with colleagues. Of course, work is related to task, to objective goals, but work is also exchange, socialization, and sharing. And I think that with remote work, these things are absent during and are absent during all the pandemic time. So it's very important for the future regulation of smart work to consider also the social belonging elements related to work. So maybe it could be interesting to make more effort for the future in the provision of co-working space, also in the suburbs, for sharing competencies, truth, but also emotions, for example.
Thank you very much. I actually do agree with you as well. And so my question, which is actually for everyone joining the roundtable, because it would be great to have an interaction, the all of us, could the EU do something in this regard? like jointly take some measures in this. So please feel free, whoever wants to take the word. It's for everyone. It's a debate. Yep. Oh, Ricardo, sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry about anything, Gianmarco. First of all, thank you again so much for having me. I'm going to follow up with what Sharko was saying and Luisa, because in future regulation, one thing that I think is missing on a lot of conversation that I've been listening about the space, about the environment, about the interactions, it's actually technical. Because I am a very sophisticated computer user. I have 3 laptops, and I kid you not. And then when I came to work at home, teleworking, because the Portuguese government decided so, I had the technician from the computer section at my job saying, well, you need to change your protocols on your laptop so that you can access our VPN network. I don't have to change the settings on my laptops. I don't want to do it. It's my laptop. It's not my job laptop. But on the other hand, and I don't know how it is in Portugal or in the Czech Republic or in Great Britain, it's not like they have a laptop for each, employee that has to go home now. So that is something that I'm also had in the back of my mind for this conversation. Would like to throw that out to the discussion.
Thank you, Ricardo. Is someone else wants to add something on this in this regard as an answer, or I will.
I would just hello and thank you for inviting people for the roundtable. It's been quite some time when I was like taking part in the roundtable discussion on a slightly different subject, but this one seems to be really extremely important. And I guess one of the things that we are seeing here is that within like 1 year, a huge revolution has taken place, and I just don't think that right now we have enough information as to where this revolution is heading to. So on one hand, we have been pointing out on the sort of we have been sort of concluding the change that has happened, so that everybody and each of us can like sit at home and work without really physically moving anywhere, and at the same time having and experiencing the consequences of this being like a complete mix of, complete destruction of the sort of a work-life balance, right? Who of us actually remembers this concept of maintaining the work-life balance? I think all the boundaries are lost simply. So this will have the consequences on who you are and on our sort of a healthcare. I think the sort of a mental health, but also the physical one. It will potentially have the benefits on, we are, one of the consequences of us staying at home and keeping us at bay is that, we are not destroying our climate as we used to do by, driving cars, even, going with the public transportation on, eventually, taking the planes to go for one meeting for, in different place where we live, right? So all this is beneficial, but on the other hand, there are the costs of it, and Federico has asked the question: who is benefiting from this change? And I guess Julia might. She's raising her hand, and I guess who is benefiting, right? Without any doubt. So those who are actually are organizing our sort of an online life. That's sort of that's clear. And who is paying for it? I think I was trying to say that we are paying for it. We as human beings, we as employees, because we are just being sort of a some of you have mentioned that we that the sort of the cost of electricity, the cost of the space is actually on the shoulders of employees, not on the shoulders of the employers, right? And sorry, on the of the companies. And obviously so if I see the role of the EU is actually trying to, take the sort of the side of those who are paying for the transformation and trying to make those who are taking the benefits of it just at least share some of the benefits with those who are paying. And I guess this needs to be sort of this needs a sort of a legal regulations, I think. So that would be, I think, my sort of a initial remark on that.
Thank you, Pavel. Giulia Passorella.
Yeah, I obviously feel like I'm the elephant in the room, as if the tools were responsible for how they're used. So I'm going to be a bit defensive here, but honestly, Zoom was born as a business-to-business application. So the idea was that you go on Zoom calls when you're in the office or when you're on business trips or whatever. But it was a surprise for us too, for the company, that it was all of a sudden used by, grandmas calling their grandchildren, by friends doing yoga classes and whatever together. So we were taken by surprise, and we had to adapt the tool for its new usage. So we had to rethink, what does it mean precisely to be connected 24/7, and is that a good thing? And believe me, we're not proud of the fact that expressions like Zoom fatigue exist. They do indicate a problem, and certainly, again, our tool was meant to be for a hybrid life, not for a fully online life. Proof of that is how we deal even internally with these problems. We have a policy which is a non-meeting Wednesdays, which means that all Zoom employees are not forbidden, but they are sort of we are highly recommended not to organize Zoom meetings on Wednesday, so that we have some time to really do deep thinking and other kind of tasks, etc. And someone mentioned what can the EU do and regulations. There's a proposal in the European Parliament on the right to disconnect and other kinds of initiatives that go in the direction. Of course, the whole issue of labor rights and higher or lower wages and how to reorganize the space within the home. Those are certainly issues that only up to a certain point we can help kind of solve from a Zoom perspective. Of course, we have ways in which we can organize the space, and we have partnerships with hardware providers that can turn a normal home room into almost an office. But is that really what most people want? And we've actually commissioned a research to BCG, to the Boston Consulting Group. And it turns out that we went, both in terms of reality and wishes, we went from no one really doing or thinking about homeworking to, of course, almost everyone doing it. And then for the future, we see that it's about half of the companies who can do homeworking, because we have to remember that there's also types of activities that cannot be done online. But anyway, for those white collars workers, etc., about half are sort of would like to keep some kind of online way of working in the future, and same for the employers. So there's certainly, we see the future as a hybrid one, and we think only in that hybrid version we can really find the balance, both for the psychological side of things, for the kind of tax and economic side of things, and also in general for the well-being of the people, not just of the employers, because we have to remember that we were forced to do all sorts of activities online, which isn't very natural. So again, a bit on the defensive side, we don't hope that this will continue, but we believe that solutions such as ours, and we're not, of course, alone in the market, will still be useful in the future, because there will be a kind of conscious choice. So if I decide that I want to do a meeting online instead of in person, it's because I have a reason. Maybe I don't want to travel that far for a short meeting. Maybe I want to take care of my children. Maybe I want to do something else. I don't know, but it will be really, it will be an option, and an option that will be taken consciously. This is at least what we hope will be the result, with, of course, a keen eye on the impact that this will have on climate change and all the rest of it.
Thank you so much, Giulia. Thank you. Christopher has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me today. This really interesting conversation. I speak as someone who's sort of worked remotely for well over 10 years. When the pandemic happened and everybody started going online, it didn't sort of change my life at all. In fact, I've been trying to promote people working more remotely for, again, over a dozen years in various books and what have you. And there are several aspects, certainly, and one of the things that's sort of come up today as well is the employee taking on the cost because they have heating and lighting and electricity and what have you. But if they're working but particularly here in the UK, we're very prevalent to commuting. And many people who work, for example, in a lot of the major cities of the country, commuting an hour and a half to 2 hours a day is not unusual. So people have sort of gained, a lot of people who commute have gained anywhere between sort of an hour a day to 4 hours a day. And it's typical that the employee bears the cost of all that commuting. Now, all that commuting has been removed and that cost has been removed. And for example, our train services here have actually had to start introducing new flexible tickets because season tickets for trains into cities are notoriously expensive. And they've started having to look at people who might only go into the office 1 or 2 days a week from now on. So it would be interesting to actually understand what the actual cost flip has actually been. And what that cost flip has been between employees and the businesses. So where and what the break-even points would be and what your commuting costs would actually be to working more remotely in a hybrid fashion from home. So without clear evidence, I would certainly challenge the notion that the employees are bearing an extra cost, because there's a high probability that actually they're saving money. And also what this situation, and certainly what the pandemic has accelerated, but no one's sort of really sort of also looking at it, is, for example, particularly for on-work training and further education, because again, there's a lot of people who do not go to university. It isn't the right route for them, and they go into work where they can actually have on-job training. And now they can actually work more effectively and train at exactly the same time without actually having a differential where they would actually have to go to a campus and take days away or half a morning away or an afternoon away from their work. So now they can actually work both from a hybrid point of view and a blended point of view, which actually again can help make them more efficient, and it can work well within their sort of life and their work situations and their life situations. And again, they can become much more flexible, which again has a value to it. So it'd be interesting to actually get that get some kind of value calculation also against that, and where that spread between employment value from an employment point of view and value from a personal point of view can also be shared. And of course, from a climate point of view, which is where I've always been arguing at it from, is of course also is we've got a massive reduction in the impact, obviously, of the commuting, both from a private transport and a public transport point of view. But interestingly, of course, emissions are still actually going up. Now emissions are going up, possibly because obviously you still got your major industrials, but also a lot of it could be because of misreporting. So you can't make a hard and fast rule of why emissions are going up, but they are still rising. So obviously we have an impact from the data centers, which needs to obviously be calculated in. But the whole essence, I feel, is because every action is interdependent with each other. that from a personal point of view, because people can actually operate on a more flexible basis, is it something that actually needs legislation for? Or is it something that actually can come through on a legal basis within maybe contractual basis, and the way that flexibility works within people's employment, whether they're working in SMEs or industry or in academia or government, public sector. It's maybe have a shift on how contractual arrangements are actually having an effect, rather than make it a legislative basis, because that I wonder whether that becomes a little bit too draconian, and for some it would work, and for others it may take liberties away by taking a very broad brush stroke attitude towards it. Just a thought.
Well, thank you, Christopher. Yeah, it's quite a structured thought, so thank you. And I see that Ricardo has a questions for Pavel.
It's interesting because I had a question for Pavel, but Christopher just touched on it also, which is, what is the equilibrium here between having benefits, for example, the environment, less pollution, even if I agree with Christopher, that is not 100% sure. And we have ways to fight that, try to decarbonize economies as much as we can. But now for Pavel, when you think about the other side of the coin, which is the downstream effect of people not going to work, because then the companies, and I'm quite sure Louisa can chip in on this also, companies they'll try to downsize, so less space for employees because they don't need them, they don't have them there, and they can rotate one, like for example, one office for 3 employees because they'll come at each different time of the week. But then there's the local commerce around it. There's the trains that go into the place. There's the bus that go into the place. There's the parking meters. So I would like to add this, and maybe Pavel, you want to react to this concern of mine, which is, maybe in your opinion, and I would really love to know it. Do you think that one thing will compensate the other?
In terms of the environment cost, or in terms of the benefits of business that is being structured around the offices?
Go whatever track you want to go.
Well, I mean, I think so my answer would be like tapping to Christopher's points, because Christopher has made a sort of a very, in my view, a fair statement. So I mean, we need to calculate. I mean, I somehow I have assumed who is this sort of a, who benefits from the situation, right? And was like specifically pointing on sort of those companies that make our online life really happening. So obviously, like with with Zooms of this world, and with the Amazons of this world, and with tons of .com companies of this world. And I was like thinking on who is paying for it, and trying to think about sort of a flip side, so the employee or consumers. But actually, Christopher is right. I mean, on the other hand, those who are staying at home are actually saving the time and money on, taking the effort to go from one place to another, maybe, and the savings that they see on their side. Still, I think, I mean, when we would make this, this calculations, I think we would see what we are increasingly seeing like all over the world. So those who are big are becoming bigger, and those who are small are becoming smaller. So I would, I think that that this sort of a fair calculations would not be as black and white as in my sort of an initial statement. But I think still that that the big ones would take the sort of a bigger share of those gains. And yes, you are also right. So whether this is the question of taking the regulations, maybe that's the sort of a fair point. Maybe you know, we are trying to over regulate too much. But if we would look from the perspective of trying to minimize the inequalities, because I do really think, I mean, me being a sort of a liberal at heart, I do really still think that what we are currently seeing in the world is actually undermining sort of a, you know, liberal view on words. So if the discrepancies are simply too big, I mean, then the whole system that is being built on is being at the sort of a verge of collapse. So from this perspective, I would simply think on the costs of this transformation, right? So because still, to me, I mean, those costs are not that clear to see, and I think that they will have a sort of a more. It will take some time to actually see those costs, not only like financial wise, but also, you know, like psychological wise. I'm not as sort of a crystal clear in my answer as in my sort of a first statement, I understand, but it's just like you know, it's just sort of a, you know, we are like work in progress, and I think that you know, we can experience this by looking at the data we have, but also like experiencing this work in progress as we speak and as we live. And I guess this is an experience for all of us, that, you know, all of a sudden we came up from home and, you know, started to live a normal life. And I'm not sure what is your experience, but I feel a bit awkward in this, you know, situation. So, you know, coming off the cage is difficult. So from this perspective, I think, you know, we can point on some of the phenomena that we already see, but as I was trying to say, I mean, the sort of a long-term consequences are not yet, in my view, that visible.
Thank you, Pavel. Thank you so much. And so, Julia, I have a question actually. You talked about the Zoom's point of view, which is something that is really interesting, actually. So can you tell us like some more on this? For example, how does Zoom forecast the future of home office, for example, or what will be? Is there any perspectives? It would be interesting to know a little bit more about this, not necessarily this, but associated with Zoom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I already touched on it in my previous sort of in the previous discussion and intervention. We see it as hybrid, and what does it mean? It means, as I mentioned, the idea that people would be a lot more conscious about when to do smart working or not, when to use a video call instead of any other kind of communication. And this is also not just for businesses, but think about schools. Of course, everyone is very eager to go back to regular sort of classroom, but the idea would be, why not taking advantage of the possibilities, not so much of distant learning, but maybe of some kind of, you know, blended learning with a lot of digital aspects. We've been talking about this for a long time, and yet it hadn't happened because the old ways were always there, and we would always revert back to traditional sort of teaching. And now I think maybe because you know, both the students as well as the teacher would have had a taste of what it's like, maybe they will also be more aware of the possibilities and more aware of the you know, how they could do both online and offline classes, and maybe mixing them and keeping students engaged beyond the time that they're actually sitting there. So in all aspects, think about healthcare as well. Of course, people will be now finally allowed to go to the doctor and talk to them, etc. But if for whatever reason they can't move, or they have difficulties, they live in remote areas, well, now they'll be much less skeptical about doing healthcare from a distance than they were before, because they've tried it. So I think the concept really is nothing will be by default anymore, neither offline nor online. It will be what is most convenient. And we're, of course, trying to help that as a company, because I agree with Pavel that we have a kind of responsibility, but the responsibility isn't to suddenly stop producing the best video conferencing quality we can or the best products, but it's rather saying, okay, is there circumstances where we should, for instance, give it for free? And we do give it for free to some schools in, deprived areas, etc. Is there anything we can do to reduce our carbon footprint? Yes or no? What about data centers? So of course, we're asking ourselves these questions because as beneficiaries of the pandemic, we also have a responsibility to make sure that whatever comes next is manageable for society. So I think this this consciousness of decisions, both on the enterprise side, but also on the user side, how they use our products, is certainly going to be key. And I would also add as a final point that the business environment is going to change. So the business environment will need these kind of solutions, but not just a simple dumb, oh, instead of having a regular phone call, I'm going to have a video call. We're really aiming at integrating as many collaborative solutions, other applications, other possibilities, other software into our own platform to make sure that it goes beyond being a simple video call and becomes something else, and it becomes a way to engage with other colleagues.
Thank you so much. And
yeah, and I wanted to apologize about the background noise, but I was at an event and I thought I would have time to go back home. And now I'm in a coffee shop, so this is a home, not really home office, but it's rather bar, like cafe office. So there's a bit of noise.
no worries at all. No worries. Thank you. So you mentioned an interesting also thing, and I would reconnect with this to Luisa and to everyone perhaps, but the school, right? So this makes me think, is there any categories, any, let's say, age range, or any gender-based differences that mostly have been affected by this process of constant digitalization post-COVID?
Thank you for this question. Also because I am a gender scholar, so for me it's I think that the differential impact of smart workings in terms of gender is really interesting. What we see during this month is that smart working was more, that for women, of course, smart working was more tiring, also because they had to follow the homeschooling of the children. Many scholars in this period hoped for a greater involvement of fathers forced to stay at home. So we can expect that maybe they help in domestic and care work. What is happened is that domestic and care work stay firmly in the hands of women. So there is a problem about the question of work-life balance. Therefore, I think there is another aspect that in my opinion, it's really important to remember, that for women, the difference linked to the occupational status are more significant. We know that not only the occupation is possible to do at home, of course, but if it's true that smart working is easier for that kind of profession that already have a greater autonomy, smart working is less satisfied for who carry out an executive type of work. So it's evident that because women are still present in executive work mainly, and because they care, the care and domestic work are carried out by women mostly, I think that the reflection we made connected to alienation, overloads, stress are much more important for women. So in my opinion, I think it's very important for the future not to view smart working as a work-life balance tool. For work-life balance, for example, we need leave, we need flexible services, and maybe it will be useful to use smart working as a system of empower to have more possibility, more autonomy, and of course to improve the well-being of workers. But work-life balance is another problems, and we need another kind of solution, I think, not only smart working. Smart working is one of the possible tools for rebalancing personal life and working life.
Thank you. Yes, what I see sometimes is actually that it is difficult to make a distinction between work and life and social life. There's a mixture between timetables, working hours. Do we even know at what point is it extraordinary work? At least this is how we call it here in Italy. Extraordinary is like extra hours of work per day. So my question is, my curiosity is, until which point we can still consider that former kind of work is still that way? I mean, working 8 hours a day today is different, is more flexible, it's just simply different. So, and in this regard, also, I would like to reconnect to what Sharka said at the very beginning, also talking about the salaries and wages. Well, it is true that on one hand, the companies are paying the internet, for example, for the employees, or other services such as electricity, all this as part of the salary. But should there be some more benefits, let's say, on top of this, or should salaries be adequate to this new trend of working from home? I don't know, Sharka, if you want to add something on this. Thank you.
Sure. Well, salaries naturally are a crucial topic for working from home. And I think that with video calls becoming the norm, travel expenses such as meals, full cars, flights, etc., are no longer necessary. And as such, employees might be paid less. But as a labor economist at Job Marketplace, Julia Polak explained, wage growth may slow in the coming years as a result of the shift to remote work, because employees are saving large amounts of money on commuting, work attire, and housing. And throughout the pandemic, we have seen many examples of wages cut, or while CEOs received substantial bonus packages. And in May 2020, for example, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg said that he expects 50% of the company's employees to be able to work remotely in the next 5 to 10 years. And he added that the salary should be adjusted as well. But of course, this is not healthy for employees to see or experience, and something should change. While there is less need for expenses pertaining to travel, salaries should reflect the work an employee does. And this means that if an employee completes the work expected of them at home or not, it doesn't matter, they should receive what they deserve. And if a wage has to be adjusted, it should be accompanied by other measures that improve the work-life balance, like, for example, then the flexible hours. And in this case, a wage cut can be maybe better understood by workers. The aim of the companies is to put in place transparent policies that limit inequalities between employees and the kind of risk of discrimination. And wage equity is even more important than cost of living considerations.
Well, thank you. And obviously, work-life balance and working policies change state by state. If I think about, let's say, the Italian working policies are very different from the Swedish one, I guess. So do you think, just a quick question for you, Sharka, still, there should be a uniform action from the EU on this, a kind of suggestion, recommendation?
I mean, that would be very nice and easy if the EU could help regarding that, but I don't think that's that easy, because it also depends on the company, and EU is something what we are part of, but they can't really tell us the rules or set the rules in every aspect of our working lives, and it depends on each country how they decide, or even on each company. So, for example, if we have a German company here in the Czech Republic, it might be completely different for the employees to work for them than when we work for a Czech company. So that would be nice if it would work like that if we would know exactly what to do, how to do it, if we would have some more guidelines, but I don't think it's possible. And yes, in effect, coronavirus has put on the most extensive home office experiment in history, providing valuable knowledge to managers and sociologists, psychologists, or even urban planners and human resources alike. Many of these specialists are already discussing the home office groundbreaking effects and noting the competitive advantage of companies whose affairs can be smoothly transferred to remote operations, and organizations with an existing technological, personal, and procedural system for working from home have benefited greatly when adapting to the ongoing circumstances. And since the beginning of the year, we have been hearing various business leaders talk about how the home office will stay with us in some form following the pandemic. But the use of the home office during the COVID-19 pandemic has proved beneficial for the majority who have experienced it, allowing for a more relaxed lifestyle, which allows us, for the most part, to deal with tasks at our own pace and convenience, and technology allows us to constantly communicate with co-workers through myriad technologies. And according to surveys, most employees enjoyed working from home and in the future would like to work remotely for on average half their work week. This, however, is where the problem arises, because the situation is very dynamic and some companies have already switched to the come to work when you want mode, but there are also a large number of companies that want the old ways back, and companies are willing to allow a home office for 1 to 2 days a month, which essentially means no home office. And according to an international survey, 94% of companies out of 800 respondents declared that they have higher productivity than before the pandemic. And people benefit greatly from autonomy and the feeling that they can decide when and what to do, and are able to adapt their work to their personal rhythm, and this motivates them more. But however, the situation is more acute in manufacturing companies, where some people must go to work and some such administration don't. And in this case, management must address this inequality so the people working in production don't take it as an injustice. However, management is not prepared for this type of situation and doesn't know how to react to it nor how to explain it to people. I don't say all, but most of it. And the question is whether it also plays a role in the fact that many managers don't like to manage people remotely because it's more difficult. Operational issues were mainly addressed, and there was no time to support and develop managers' capabilities. A few companies met with them and told them how to approach communication in such a situation. So yes, the fact that they are unsure of leading people from a distance can play also a role, but it's even harder to lead people in hybrid mode with some in the office and some at home at the computer. And people in the office tend to neglect those who work remotely and forget to involve them in discussions and ask them questions. And through telecommunication, it's difficult to pick up on all non-verbal signals and making it harder to understand and manage employees. And from the employee's perspective, some argue that having a clear boundary between home and work is necessary to avoid confusion or fatigue, and not having a clearly delineated part of your life where work is the focus, and the same for your personal life, can have negative outcomes for employees. And studies have shown that the drug and alcohol abuse have increased globally since the pandemic began. And additionally, as large tech companies are becoming increasingly influential in politics and society, another set of issues arises due to our dependence on tech and social media. These companies wield impressive amounts of power in our daily lives. And as such, we must be very we have also seen the importance of borders diminish due to the nebulous nature of how some companies operate, and governments must do what they can to limit these companies' influence and tease out the benefits they offer. So the best answer is when we say objectively how much time we were at home. Yeah, like it's important to ask what works for the company or for work, what work for us. So if we can measure how much time we were at home, how much we did, how the results were affected, and if there is a comparison possible with the last year, and it's the best how to know what is the most effective and what the company can do. And it's also a good idea to ask what management would need. And yeah, and if someone has a very collaborative job and needs to work closely with others, they must therefore be in one place with colleagues. However, a lot of people work not in teams, but in departments where everyone does their job and which is not directly linked to anyone. So I don't think there can be just one rule which is applied for everyone, but it depends on the nature of the company and on the state or how they see it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any observation on this? Actually, this is quite a interesting topic. Is it Riccardo, did you raise your hand?
No, Federico has his hand raised for some time
sorry,
now.
not Riccardo, sorry, Federico, yes.
Hi, everyone. Taking the cue from what Sarka and previously Luisa said about seeing and leaving home office as an opportunity and not as a constriction due to the controversial effects on psychological side. I was wondering, and I'd like to ask you that are much more expert than me, if you think that in a short period in the future, interventions from policymakers will be required to regulate the use of these tools or not, and if so, in which way you think it will be the most effective, just like a European regulation, or if you think that it's preferable that each nations will have their own regulation linked and related on their own work systems. Thank you.
Who wants to take this? Sarka, Julia, maybe?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it, but I'm just going to move outside because there's even music here. What's this? Trying to find a quiet place where I can actually tell you. Of course, anything that comes from the regulator, at least for companies, most of these companies, like my own company, they're at global level, not at national level, and therefore, fragmentation in the regulation would make life harder, not just for us, but also for travelers or workers who work across borders, who move around. So the more, at least in Europe, we're talking about Europe, the more uniform the legislation is, the better it is in general for everyone. But I think regulation should be careful, first of all, because there's a tendency to lump together all of tech companies as if they were the same. They have very different business models. Some tech companies like ours, they don't monetize data. The business model is based on licenses. So there's nothing kind of hidden or unknown or unsure about what is happening and who's the product, as it were. So the regulation should be proportionate to also the role that these tools play in your life, and some are more pervasive and intrusive than others, and some are also kind of more entrenched in our lives. So I think a differentiated approach is what is needed, and we are seeing it right now on European level, even with the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act. So all of these initiatives are precisely to regulate tech companies, but they do take into consideration that not all platforms are the same. Not all platforms are gatekeepers. Not all platforms are social media, and so on and so forth. So I would, from Zoom's perspective, it's not about escaping regulation, but it's about ensuring that regulation allows citizens to continue to benefit from technology without necessarily kind of curbing innovation and putting excessive limits. Citizens should also be free to choose whatever they want. Some people are totally happy to be on Zoom meetings the whole day, and others are not. So we as well, I say we, but certainly the Liberal Forum should keep in mind the freedom of consumers and users first, and then everything else.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, so we are on our way to conclude the first panel. I would give the floor to Pavel, because in your capacity of social and consumer trend observer, what are actually the social and consumer trends post-COVID-19?
Thank you. So the trends would be certainly, I do agree with Julia that we are going to the hybrid world, and that the sort of a hybrid world is going to be with us. And I think everybody wants that. So the companies want that, the employees want that. The sort of a tricky part is, how this hybrid world is going to function. So what would be the proportions? But certainly, this is going to stay with us, and I think that we certainly short term will see some of the benefits of it in terms of the work efficiency. I think that the question mark we already have, that we have in mind is to what extent working only online is going to jeopardize, the sort of a creative part of our work. Since this sort of a social interaction, it's really a sort of a fuel for the creativity. I think that the sort of a long term, the sort of a hybrid way of working is going to impact the way we live in terms of our own home, which is already happening, but also it will impact the sort of a living an environment as such. So we are going to increasingly see some of the developments that are being built in somewhere, not only in suburbs, but more in the sort of in the places that are like in the middle of nowhere, let's say, where the sort of a small community is being built, where you have the accommodation, where you have schools, when you have agricultural functions being put in one place. So inevitably, it will, this way of working is going to impact, how we are living and how the cities, for example, are going to look like. Longer term, I think we need to figure out, how to maintain the sort of a mental health in this context, and this is how we are going to do this. It is, in my view, still a question that needs to be answered. And the last thing, which is really tapping, I think, to the next panel, is that it's a question about the privacy. So we haven't been talking about this during this panel, but I think, I've spotted one of the quotes from one of the trend reports that actually privacy is going to be a luxury for all of us, and the privacy meaning the privacy online, but also the privacy meaning that that you can really feel private in your own home somehow. So those would be like a sort of main things that the COVID and the transformation it helped to speed up is living with us. And as I'm saying, those are the trends, and to what extent those trends are going to transform the way we live. It's obviously we are going to see this in coming months. I think not only years but months.
Thank you. Yeah, privacy is definitely a hot topic, and we will deal with it in the second panel also with other perspectives and interactions between social media platforms and states. So is there any question before taking a very, very short break, actually?
I had a question for
Ricardo,
Julia,
yes.
and
Yes.
I know we're running out of time, Julia, but I was very, very interested in what you mentioned about how the company is following some of the psychometric results of spending all time in Zoom. And you're saying that some people love it, other people, are very egocentric and they don't mind looking at themselves during the whole day. But do you have any data on that? Are you collecting data like Pavel saying this is like a social experiment going on? But one thing that I was interested in about home office is this perception that the boss is always looking at you, because we have MS Teams, it's on all the time, or we have Zoom and the box with the box with the boss, it's always on. Do you have anything that you can add us on that?
So no, actually what I mentioned was more of a sort of personal observation. This and people don't mind. And by the way, about seeing yourself, there's an option where you can prevent that from happening. So you kind of disappear. So because I know that it's awkward and normally it doesn't happen. So we've even thought about that. No, I wasn't quoting any specific research. It was more like talking to colleagues, etc. Zoom can't really monitor what is happening within meetings because meetings are encrypted. So there's no way that Zoom can access what content, who's talking more, who's listening in, etc., etc. So so it would be really hard for us to have those metrics because we just don't have access to content in meetings.
Thank you. So it's 6:07, I guess 3 minutes, and we'll be back for the second panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a 3 minutes break.
Thank you.
Thank you.